Hello, and welcome to this video on variances reconciliation of the budgeted costs to the actual costs. So I've got a question here to show you how to do this process. But CD Limited has provided the following budgeted information. So budgeted production is 25,000 units. So they're expecting to make 25,000 units. The budgeted direct labour cost, this is in total for those 25,000 units, is £500,000. The budgeted direct material costs, again for the 25,000 units, is £1,250,000. The labour hours per unit, are 4 hours, and the material quantity per unit are 7 kilograms. Now, they are the budgeted amounts. Now, the actual production was 24,000 units. The actual labour per unit is 3.8 hours at the rate of £6.50 per hour, and the actual material per unit is 6.8 kilograms at a cost of £9.20 per kilogram. So in part 1.1, just calculate the following variances: the material price variance, the material usage variance, the labour rate variance, the labour efficiency variance, and then in 1.2, we'll prepare a reconciliation of budgeted to actual costs, and in 1.3, we've got to advise management whether the business has controlled costs effectively during the period and justify your answer. So the first part of the variances, you've got 10 marks. The reconciliation, you've got 4 marks. And the advice in part 3, you have 6 marks, giving a total of 20 marks. So let's look at part 1 then. So the material price variance. To work out the material price variance, you have the standard cost times the actual quantity of material used, subtract the actual cost times the actual quantity of material used. Now, in this question, we're not told the actual standard cost, so we're going to have to work that one out. So the standard cost for the material price is going to be the total material cost of 1,250,000, which is the amount there, then divided by the amount of units we're planning to make. So that's 25 units at 7 kilograms per unit. So it's divided by 25,000 times 7. Now, if you do that calculation, you get a decimal number, 7.142857. So I'm going to leave that number as it is at the moment. That's going to be my standard cost. Then I'm going to multiply it by the actual quantity of material used. So go back to the question, we want the actual quantity and the amount used per unit. The actual quantity was 24,000 units, and it was at 6.8 kilograms per unit. So I've got 24,000 times 6.8. Now, if you times them together to 7.142857 times 24,000 times 6.8 kilograms, that gives us a standard cost of £1,165,714. Now we're going to look at the actual cost for the actual quantity of material used. So the actual cost, going back to the information in the question, the actual cost here is for materials £9.20 per kilogram. So £9.20 per kilogram. So that's your actual cost. And the actual cost of material used is the same as before, 24,000 units at 6.8 kilograms. So £9.20 times 24,000 times 6.8 gives us a total of £1,501,440. Now you can see that the actual cost is greater than the standard cost here. The actual cost in total is 1,501,440, and the standard cost is 1,165,714. Because the actual is greater than the standard, the variance is going to be adverse. And the difference between the two of them is 335,726. So material price variance, we've got £335, £726 adverse. So that's the amount extra it's cost us above what we had planned it to cost. Right, material usage variance. We've got a standard quantity of material for the actual production times the standard price. Subtract the actual quantity of material used times the standard price. So the standard quantity of material for the actual production. So back to the question now. The standard quantity, the budgeted amount, is 7 kilograms, and the actual production is 24,000. So 7 kilograms times £24,000, and the standard price worked out in part 1, it was 7.142857. So we times the 7 by the 24,000, times the 7.142857, we get £1,200,000. That's the standard quantity of materials for the actual production times the standard price. Now we're going to take away the actual quantity of material used times the standard price. Now the actual quantity of material used, if I go back to the information in the question, The actual materials per unit is 6.8 grams. So 6.8 grams, sorry, not grams, pounds, times 24,000 units times the standard price again. So we've got 6.8 times 24,000 times 7.142857 gives us a total amount of £1,165,714. So the standard amount is 1,200,000 and the actual amount is 1,165,714. So the actual amount is less than the standard amounts, therefore the variance is favourable, and the difference between the two of them is £34,286. So material usage variance is £34,286 favourable. So basically, it costs us less to use the amount of material we use than originally planned. Labour rate variance. So it's a standard cost times the actual labour hours. Subtract the actual cost times, again, the actual labour hours. Now, the standard cost, again, doesn't tell us. So we need to work out a total for the labour hours. So we go back to the question. Budgeted total labour cost was £500,000. So that's where the £500,000 comes from. Then divided by the expected total hours. So go back to the question here. So it's 25,000 units and it's 4 hours per unit. So it's 25,000 divided by 4. Sorry, times 4. So we do the calculation. 500,000 divided by 25,000 times 4 gives us a standard cost of £5. So now we can start working out the variance now. So the standard cost is £5. The actual labour hours is the actual number of units produced, which was 24,000. And it was at 3.8 hours per unit. So back down here. So it's 24,000 times 3.8 hours per unit. Now the actual cost, again, go back to the question, the actual cost. The actual cost was £6.50 per hour. Times the actual labour hours, again, the number of units, 24,000 times 3.8 hours. So the first one, £5 times 24,000 times 3.8 hours, gives us £456,000. And the second one, £6.50 times 24,000 times 3.8 hours, gives us £592,800. So again, you'll see the standard cost is £456,000, but the actual cost is greater, £592,800. So as the actual is greater than the standard, it's an adverse variance. And the difference between the two of them is £136,800. Right, labour efficiency now. So we've got the standard labour hours for actual production times the standard cost. So the standard labour hours, I go back to the question. Here we go. The standard hours is 4 hours per unit. So that's the 4 hours. Actual production is 24,000. And the standard cost, I'll go back to the information in the question, we've got it here, is £5 per unit. Now, so 4 hours times 24,000 times £5, that gives us £480,000. Now, take away the actual labour hours. So I'm going to go back to the question for the actual labour hours. That was 3.8 hours. Times the actual quantity of 24,000 times the standard price of £5. So 4 hours times 24,000 times £5 gives us the £480,000. And 3.8 hours times 24,000 times £5 gives us £456,000. So again, here the standard amount is this time is greater than the actual amount. So therefore, the variance is going to be favourable. And the difference between the two amounts is 24,000. So the labour efficiency variance is £24,000 favourable. So that's the first part of the question. Now, in the second part, you've got to reconcile the budgeted costs to the actual costs. So the first thing we need to know is what are the budgeted costs. So the budgeted cost of material, well, go back to part 1 now. You go to your material usage variance. We've got a standard quantity of material for the actual production times the standard price, and that comes to £1,200,000. So that's basically the budgeted costs for material. So £1,200,000. And the labour costs, again, the budgeted one is the standard labour hours for actual production times the standard cost, and that came to £480,000. So that's your labour costs. So your total budgeted costs is the £1,200,000 plus the £480,000, giving us a total budgeted cost of £1,680,000. So that's what they originally expected before the actual costs were incurred. Now the material price variance, if I go back to material price variance, was £335, £726 adverse. That means it cost us more. So we're going to add that on. So 335,726, we're going to add that on. Material usage variance was £34,026 favourable. So in other words, that was less than we had expected. So I'm going to deduct the £34,286. Labour rate variance, again, it's adverse. So it costs us more. So we're going to have to add that on to our budgeted costs. So it's adverse for £136,800. And labour efficiency variance, just above here, £24,000 favourable. So it costs us less than we expected. So we're going to deduct that. Now that gives us the actual cost then of £2,094,240. Now we need to split that between the material cost and labour cost to make sure we're at the right amounts. So the actual material costs, if I go back to the question, again, the material price variance, the actual cost times the actual quantity of material used came to £1,501,440. So that's my material cost, is the actual cost of material. Now the actual cost for labour. Here we go. The actual cost for the labour rate variance was the actual cost times the actual labour hours, and that worked out to be £592,800. So £592,800. So that's my actual labour costs. If we combine the material costs with the actual labour costs, it comes to £2,094,240. Now that is the same as our actual cost there. So now we completed the reconciliation of the budgeted costs to the actual costs. Well, the final part of the question was a little written bit. So it says, advise management whether the business has controlled costs effectively during the period, and then justify your answer. So let's have a little look at the reconciliation for a minute. The material price says 335,726 adverse. So they paid a lot more money than they planned to do for the price of the material. And we've got to think of a reason why that is in a minute. Material usage, though, is a favourable variance. So again, can we think of a reason why? And can we link the two of these together? Labour rate. It cost us a lot more than expected. We want to know a reason why. Labour efficiency was less than expected. Again, we want to know a reason why. And can we combine those two together? So this is what I put down together for us. The material price variance of 335,726 adverse shows that the business paid a higher price for materials than expected. Now, management needs to investigate the reason for this. It could be due to an increase in the price of materials, or the business chose a better quality of material. Now, they chose a better quality material. This will be in accordance with the material usage variance being favourable, or there is still a net variance of £304,440, which was the 335,726, take away the 34,286. Now, that must be investigated by the management. So just let me put my pound sign in there. Now, the labour rate variance, which we've got there, is £136,800 adverse. So again, why is that? Again, this shows that the business paid a higher rate of pay for labour than originally planned. And again, management needs to investigate this. It could be due to a lack of labour, so therefore they had to pay a higher rate, or they employed more highly skilled labour than planned. Now again, this would be in accordance, so let me just check the accordance. This would be in accordance with the favourable labour efficiency variance of £24,000, which could be due to employing higher skilled labour than planned. There is still a net labour variance of £112,800 adverse. That's the 136,800 take away £24,000, again, which management needs to investigate. Now, because these variances need to be investigated, my conclusion is, overall, management has not controlled costs effectively during the period. So that's a question on reconciliation of budgeted costs to actual costs.